Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Parisi, General Counsel at the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. APA is a private nonprofit located in Washington, D.C., serving prosecutors as well as their law enforcement and community partners. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Today's webinar, Having a Peer Support Program and Help During COVID-19, will discuss compassion fatigue and highlight Maricopa County Attorney's Office peer support program that has been modeled by other offices throughout the country. During today's webinar, you will be able to submit questions for our speakers using the question box on your GoToWebinar toolbar located on the right side of your screen. While you may ask questions during the course of the presentation, we will hear from our speakers first and ask questions after. If you need additional assistance, please feel free to contact us directly at webinars@apainc.org. This webinar is made possible by the support of the Animal Legal Defense Fund. ALDF helps support APA's Animal Cruelty Prosecution Project that provides training and resources for prosecutors and allied professionals in prosecuting animal cruelty and animal fighting. Our Animal Cruelty Prosecution Project works closely with our Domestic Violence Prosecution Project in understanding animal cruelty is often a co-occurring crime to family and interpersonal violent crime. To get started, I want to introduce David Rosengard, a senior staff attorney in the Animal Legal Defense Fund's Criminal Justice Program. David works with the stakeholders across the criminal justice system to pursue justice on behalf of animal cruelty victims. David also teaches animal law at his alma mater, Lewis and Clark Law School, where he did both his JD and animal law LLM. So take it away, David. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So in the interest of time, we're going to dive right in because we want to make sure that we've got plenty of time for questions at the end. And I'm going to start us off by talking about compassion fatigue and how that relates to the work we do as attorneys, the work that comes up in the prosecution context, and in particular, how that can relate to responding to and prosecuting animal crimes. But we'll start with what is compassion fatigue. And I'll be clear that I'm not a mental health professional. I'm another attorney, much like all of you. So this is a set of definitions that are a good working tool for us, not a diagnostic manual. But compassion fatigue for our purposes is both the process and the result of cumulative repeat exposures to pain, distress, and injustice suffered by others. And the basic theory here is that as humans, we are social responsive animals, and thus exposure to that kind of trauma is fatiguing to us, both in the senses of sort of energy fatigue, and by that I mean it's exhausting, it's tiring, but also in the way that we use fatigue in a material sense. And by that I mean that this sort of exposure is corrosive, it's sapping, it saps, it weakens our ability to get other things done. And really at the core of this is the psychological notion, psychological theory of vicarious trauma, that we can experience trauma not only by direct exposure to painful, horrific things happening either to us or in front of us, but also simply by hearing about it happening to others, by interacting with people who have experienced that, by hearing or seeing narratives of that. And this happens in a few ways. So our counterparts in the biological sciences profession have documented exclusively, thoroughly that we have mirror neurons that tend to fire when we observe or hear about others experiencing various things. And this is a way that humans are sort of hardwired to be responsive. If we see someone else in a traumatic scenario, our neurons that would respond to the same sort of trauma tend to start firing and lighting up. And then on a mental emotional level, this is just part of empathy. When we hear about someone else experiencing painful or traumatic events, that tends to resonate with us. So what sort of symptoms do we see associated with compassion fatigue? On a physical level, we often see disruptive sleep patterns, too much, too little, disrupted appetite and hunger, again, too much or too little, musculature and joint pain. This is often related to carrying stress physically in our bodies, muscles tightening up, weakened immune system, and panic attacks. And a lot of this seems to come down to our bodies cranking up an adrenal and cortisol response to stress and trauma. It's sort of the fight, flight, or freeze response. But in this case, it's not happening because we're actually exposed to a crisis scenario. It's happening because we are vicariously experiencing a crisis scenario. And so our bodies get keyed up to respond to this and then don't necessarily have anything to do with that built up systemic response. On a mental and emotional level, compassion fatigue can represent itself in terms of issues concentrating, issues remembering things, feelings of withdrawal, free-floating guilt or anxiety, intrusive thoughts, particularly intrusive thoughts about the sort of trauma that we are hearing or seeing others experience, and an increased difficulty in what psychologists refer to as meaning making. It increased difficulty assigning meaning and significance to events. Some might refer to this as a rise of cynicism. And I think it's important for us to distinguish this from burnout. Compassion fatigue is a response to the trauma of others, and burnout is typically a response to a sense that the needs of a task chronically exceed the resources we have available to meet that task. Uh, Burnout often is characterized by people saying, I'm frustrated with these working conditions. I'm frustrated with the job. I love what I do, but I wish we had more resources to do it, which may sound familiar to many of us in the legal profession. Whereas compassion fatigue is more typified by, I love the goals of my job, but doing it is exhausting. And I don't know how to cope with daily exposure to that trauma. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about why this is particularly relevant to the legal profession and animal crimes. And of course, this is not unique to animal crimes. We see this in any kind of profession that deals with vicarious trauma. So a wide range of helping professions outside the law, but it's particularly relevant to attorneys. And part of that has to do with the simple fact that people usually don't go looking for attorneys when everything in their life is working out well. We tend to be involved with people at bad points in their life. This is particularly true when we're doing prosecution work. We're responding to crime. We're responding to someone who's been victimized by someone else, not only harming them, but harming them in a way that transgresses our social standards of what's acceptable. Uh, and compassion fatigue is something that as attorneys we're also vulnerable to because of part of the way the legal profession works. And we're trained to approach things dispassionately. We're trained to analyze matters objectively, and we're trained to maintain a professional demeanor. And that makes it hard to acknowledge the emotional cost. Some of the risk factors that psychologists say are traditionally associated with compassion fatigue are being a conscientious perfectionist, having little to no downtime between events, working in a stressful environment, and having repeated interaction with other traumatized people. And if that sounds familiar to anyone working in a prosecutorial environment, that is apt. Surveys consistently reveal that lawyers doing criminal law work and judges doing criminal law cases have more secondary trauma than even mental health professionals. Some particular challenges for animal crime are we're often operating outside a normative paradigm. One of the fundamental questions is, do animals count as others? And it seems pretty clear that when we're responding to animal cases, we can build up vicarious trauma from that. But for people who aren't experiencing that, it can be hard to explain why this matters because the animals aren't, well, they're not humans. Also, if you're dealing with a case involving, say, chickens being tortured in awful ways, It can be hard to explain why that's traumatic to your colleagues over a lunch that involves them eating chickens. Um, there's also some issues involving the public response to animal crimes. As attorneys, we operate within a system, and that system has constraints. People who get upset about animal crimes don't always understand that. And so we can find ourselves assailed from the outside from the very people who should be championing the work we do on behalf of animal victims. And of course, the sad fact is that our clients or the victims we work with are never able to say thank you. They simply don't have the linguistic skills to do that. So moving on in my last 2 minutes, on the next slide, I'll talk about some ways to prevent and mitigate these issues. One is simply being aware of your own thresholds and things that spur vicarious trauma for you, and keeping an eye on symptoms of vicarious trauma and responding to that, and being intentional about when and how you engage. Certainly, we have to do the work that we take on as attorneys. We prosecute the cases we prosecute, but that doesn't mean you have to intentionally expose yourself to those triggers outside of your work environment. In the same way that a prosecutor doing DV or child abuse cases does not necessarily have to watch the latest Lifetime movie on DV or child abuse, none of you handling animal cases are obligated to watch any commercial involving Sarah McLachlan playing over photos of horribly abused animals. If that's not going to help you do your job, it's just going to stress you out, you don't have to go there. Engage in self-care. Sleep well, eat well, meditate, engage in hobbies that take you out of your workspace. And most importantly, something that's been shown to work extremely well is having a group of peers to debrief your cases with. And by that, I mean not just the legal issues involved, but the emotional response you have. Have a space within your DA team, within your prosecutorial unit, within your colleagues who do law enforcement work to discuss the way the cases make you feel at a space where it's safe to do that. I know that's not something we're always prepped to do as attorneys, but it is incredibly important in this context. And finally, be aware of balance and boundaries. Unplug as needed. If you take a vacation, make sure it's actually a vacation. And always know that you can get professional assistance with these issues. Much as we are professionals in a law context, there are people out there who are professionals in a mental health context, and we should always feel comfortable turning to them. And due deference to the rest of our presentation, I will now turn things over to an in-depth look into how Maricopa County handles these matters.
Thank you, David. Next, I want to introduce Hilary Weinberg. Hilary is a career prosecutor and has been with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for just shy of 21 years. She is currently assigned to the Vehicular Crimes Bureau, where she prosecutes cases involving serious injuries and deaths caused by impaired drivers. She recently spent 5 years as the chief of the Family Violence Bureau and is one of the leaders of the office's support program, or peer support program, excuse me. So Hilary, I am sending the screen over to you for you to take over the presentation.
All right, thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Can you see this okay? Is it showing up all right?
It is, but it is in note mode.
Okay, can you show my other screen? Let me go to screen 2. So, okay, how's that? Better?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Hilary Weinberg, and I'm a prosecutor at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. And as Marlene said, I am one of the coordinators for our office's peer support program. And our peer support program is kind of novel. There are not that many organizations like it around the country. We were definitely one of the first to get on board with this. So I'd like to go through my slides and discuss with you this program that we have and sort of how we're using it right now. So let me go into there. All right, here we go. So first of all, as far as domestic violence prosecutors go, I've spent a lot of years as a domestic violence prosecutor, and I will tell you, you are definitely my people. A number of years ago, I went to a conference with the APA that they put on for people who did some supervisory work at this conference, and it was just so wonderful to be around other prosecutors and people who get it, who understand the stresses of what we go through every day, from our victims, from our defendants, from the courts. Domestic violence prosecution is fairly unique because a lot of times you're fighting the people that you're really trying to fight for. So there's a lot of nuances there. It can lead to a lot of stress. So as a domestic violence prosecutor, a lot of what I learned is as part of the peer support program seemed to blend very nicely. A lot of people who are doing these types of cases in our office have really heavy caseloads, a lot of difficult people and issues that they deal with, and we really understand that. So just having that type of a program available to basically anybody in our office who does anything, but especially to have something available for those prosecutors who do some certain crimes that really can trigger a lot of stress and overwhelming types of emotions is certainly good. So we completely understand how you're feeling as domestic violence prosecutors or as just any prosecutors in any agency. So what we want to talk about is the peer support program that we have, how it can assist with issues like managing stress, including COVID-19. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we kind of got started. So here's our, obligation copyright slide. And basically, you should be proud to be a domestic violence prosecutor, those of you who are taking on this challenge. Domestic violence is just one of those areas where there is so much going on. I know that the recent quarantines with COVID have caused a huge spike in the number of cases around the country. There's a lot of people not able to leave their homes, people that aren't able to get to the resources and get to people who can help them. So being able to take on those cases and to assist with those individuals who need that type of help, especially now, is very, very commendable. So, I mean, it's definitely something to be proud of, but of course it does come with a lot of stress, and sometimes you might need help dealing with that stress, and that is okay because we understand that this is a really tough job, and there's a lot of factors that are there. So, I mean, if you're a prosecutor, and especially if you're doing domestic violence work, but which is for me, something that I've done for quite some time, but there's a lot of repeated exposure to a lot of abnormal or violent events that you see. And as was talked about before, there's sometimes a feeling of burnout after you've been on the job for quite a while. And something else that's also very common is that we see a lot of our attorneys taking on some vicarious trauma. And this is especially something that we see in our domestic violence cases, our animal abuse cases, child abuse cases. People who work around these types of cases, be them prosecutors, their paralegals, the secretaries, any other staff, these types of vicarious stress can permeate your life completely. And also what's traumatic for one person may not be for another. Some people just are not really good with certain types of cases, and we often have to recognize that as well. So what is peer support and what is this program? So basically, peer support is basically a supportive assistance provided by trained staff, and those staff are under the direction and supervision of a mental health professional. So the people that run the peer support program, for example, at the county attorney's office here in Maricopa County, we don't have any kind of special degrees. We're not psychologists. We don't have anything like that. We're not even holding ourselves out as counselors. We're not a therapy. We're not counseling. We are basically a group of people who got together and decided we wanted to be there so that somebody who needed to vent about something, somebody who was going through a certain type of stressful situation, had somewhere to go to talk about it, and in a confidential setting. And I'll talk a little bit more about how our program is set up, but it was very important that it was set up in a way that people could confidentially come to somebody else and talk about whatever it was they need to that was stressing them, and hopefully feel better by the end of that conversation, or get some direction or a reference on somewhere else to go if the problem didn't seem to be one that we were able to handle. We're basically designed to provide a mechanism. We recognize that there are distressed employees and provide them an outlet to assist them in coping with stressful aspects of working for a prosecutor's office. I don't think anyone out there is going to disagree that the type of work that we do is stressful. We have people's lives in our hands, both defendants and victims, and we're really trying to do a lot of good, but sometimes that comes with a lot of work and a lot of stress behind it. So our team is designed to provide that kind of support to our employees who need it. And as I said, we basically listen. We might provide some feedback, and if necessary, we can provide a referral on to another service where maybe it's somebody who needs more specialized mental health treatment. We can't give that, but we can get them to somebody who can. So our goal is basically to minimize the impact of trauma exposure related to our work and to help somebody recover from exposure from harmful stress. We also kind of keep an eye out for employees if we see that somebody is starting to be very stressed or very upset about things. And in some cases, we have been incredibly proactive. For example, a few weeks ago in the Phoenix area, we had a young lady who was, I think she was 17 years old. She apparently was a victim of sex trafficking, and she was hit by a car on the freeway. I'm not sure what the circumstances were behind that, but she was a victim in an active case. And one of our team members actually proactively reached out to the prosecutor working on that case because she happened to know that the prosecutor had at least some kind of relationship with that young lady, and that was going to be very upsetting for her when she learned that this young lady had been killed this way. So a lot of times we're kind of on the proactive lookout for somebody who might need some type of assistance, and then we check on them and we provide referrals. So how we got started, basically, we kind of saw that there was a need out there, that there was a lot of stress. Our program was the brainchild of our former Chief Deputy, Mark Fall. He's no longer with the office, but Mr. Fall was also a prior law enforcement officer. And when you kind of think about it, if there's a very stressful situation for law enforcement, you know, you have a police officer who might be involved with a shooting, or maybe they had to go pull a drowning child out of the swimming pool and then they have kids at home. If there's some type of really stressful situation, a law enforcement officer's, squad, they're going to call somebody, and they have what's called a CISM team, a Critical Incident Stress Management Team. And that team responds to the officer, debriefs him, makes sure he's okay, follows up with him, makes sure that he's going to be doing well going forward. And the thought was, law enforcement has that for their police officers, but what about the prosecutors? Because we get called out to those scenes. We have to see the abused child. We have to go to autopsies of babies and see some very horrific things. But we don't see it once after we get called out. We get the case, and then we have photos, and then we see it over and over and over again. And our staff has to go through, and they have to look at these photos. I had a paralegal I remember years ago who was incredibly upset because we wound up with a case where a woman was decapitated, and my poor paralegal had to look at these photos because she had to number them and send them off for disclosure, and things like that can really weigh on a person. We have to recognize that, just because the law enforcement officer gets help doesn't mean that the people who see things afterwards don't need help. So that was basically how we started to see the need, and it really comes down to a lot of factors that we've built in there. I mean, the volume of cases can make things very stressful in the job, the types of cases that people are doing, and the materials in cases can make people incredibly upset. Domestic violence, child abuse, and hats off to the people at the ALDF for all the hard work they do. Animal abuse cases, nobody likes to look at those. I remember a number of years ago, I was helping out a grand jury, and I had a case where, and I'll never forget this case just because of how bad it was, where I had a defendant who fed almost a newborn puppy to his son's snake to teach him a lesson because he wasn't taking proper care of the snake. And, this was a grand jury panel I was in front of all day, presenting them with armed robberies and burglaries and assaults and all these horrible crimes. But I never saw people get so fired up and angry as I did when that detective came in to talk about what happened with that puppy. And these people just were in arms over this puppy. And it's amazing. I can't tell you a single thing about any of those armed robberies or any of those assaults. All I remember is that animal case. So really hats off to those of you who do those animal abuse cases. I can't do them, but tons of respect to those of you who do, because that would stress me out and upset me completely. So anyway, this is the kind of reason why we have this type of program. It's because different cases affect people differently, different stressors. So we want to make sure that everyone is kind of covered in what we're doing here at Maricopa County. So what we did was we basically developed a volunteer survey to get some feedback from our staff to see what was going on. And we wanted our staff to have kind of some input. We wanted to say, what would you want to see? What would you want to do? And we had a couple of trained mental health professionals, Dr. Gilmartin, Dr. Bull, who came in to develop the survey questions, and they described kind of what they thought we might do with a peer support program. You know, what is your expectations? What do you think we need it? What kind of things would you expect us to use the program for? What concerns do you have? So they put the survey together, and the survey itself, that part wasn't stressful. But the results really kind of blew us away. What blew us away is that our office is around 1,000 people at any given time, and almost 600 people actually responded to the survey. And if you have a non-mandatory survey and like almost, you know, half the people respond, it's very mind-blowing. But there was definitely a need for the program, and that people thought they actually might use it. And some, you know, I have a quote here from one of the people who we surveyed who just said, look, I love this work, but man, this stuff is really stressing me out, and I've done some of these really hard cases, and I can't sleep at night sometimes. So we really realized that there was a need, and we really have to get on board in doing this for our employees, because if employees get to a point where they just can't seem to, you know, to accept what's going on at work, they get very stressed out, what's going to happen is they're going to leave. And you don't want good employees to leave if there's something you can do to make them stay. And that was an important aspect to what we were trying to do. How can we make the, you know, general mental health of our people better and get people to stay and to continue to love this job the same way that they did on day one. So we also found from the survey, we got some feedback on how to proceed with it. We had a very big mandatory training for all of our employees from Dr. Gilmartin on emotional trauma in the workplace. And it was at that seminar that he introduced this concept of having a peer support program. We also retained, you know, a mental health expert to consult with the program. I'll talk about her in just a moment. But these were things that kind of came out of that survey and where we wanted to go with the program. And the next thing that happened was, and this is a little funny story, was they chose the peer support coordinators. So they needed some people to be basically the administrators of the team, to have team meetings, coordinate training. Sometimes we're the first point of contact if something happens. So I was asked to be one of these people. And the funny part about being asked by Mr. Fall to help run this program was I initially said to him, you know, it's kind of a good concept, but I don't think it's going to work. And his response was great, because I'm putting you as one of the people in charge of the program. So therefore I know it's going to work. So I went, okay, fabulous. So that was kind of a surprise for me, but you don't say no to the boss. And I was kind of curious to see if we could pull this off, if we could make a program that people would work, that people would use, that would really have some traction in the office. So we set to work on doing that. So at that point, it was myself, one of my coworkers who's not with the office anymore, Kelly Luther, who's a huge just victims' rights background. She was a wonderful attorney. I miss her every day. She was my co-coordinator for a long time. I'm currently working with Jennifer Heisick, who is a victim advocate supervisor in our office. She did a lot of paperwork and a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, and then a little ways into our program, we actually made her a team member, and she's been absolutely wonderful to work with and a great partner for me, and we consistently talk and bounce ideas off each other and to keep our program motivated and keep it going. So you have to have people who are willing to basically coordinate the program. The next thing that we did is, well, there were some nuances with the program. So one of the big issues that came up when we were trying to design the program was this whole concept of confidentiality, because you're in basically a law office. People are very skeptical, and people were concerned whether what was said to a team member in a session would be kept confidential, and it absolutely is. We actually had it written into our policy, and there's actually policies out there that if we violate that confidentiality, we could lose our job. I mean, it's that strict. So we take it very seriously, and there's only a few times where there's an exception, because sometimes there has to be, and that's if and I can't even give you an example, but like a serious breach of office policy, if they've committed an actual crime, if the person that we're talking to is maybe in danger or is a threat to themselves or somebody else. And then if for some reason we're subpoenaed by civil, we might have to discuss whether we can give up that confidentiality. But those are incredibly rare circumstances. I I can only think of one circumstance where we actually had to discuss a certain individual because we were concerned about some self-harm, but that's incredibly rare. Most of the time that we talk to somebody, the conversation never leaves the room. We don't take notes. It's very, very innocuous of any other contact between the person and the team member. So we do everything we can to make sure that there's no one who knows that that person came to see the peer support program unless they want to make sure somebody knows. We've had several people that we have been, that have basically been our customers, so to speak, that we have handled in peer support, and they were so pleased with how they were treated, and they really liked what we were able to do for them, that they, went very vocal that they've used the program. They thought it was great. And then I've had some people from that actually apply to become team members down the road because they really appreciated what we did. So there's a lot of benefits and things that have come out of having our program, but confidentiality was really a big sticking point, and it hasn't really come up at all since our team has been in effect. The next thing that we had to do was basically select the people in our office who wanted to be on the team. Like I mentioned, our office is around 1,000 people, so we needed kind of a substantial team. We hover around 15 to 20 at any given time. Sometimes, people might leave the office, or they might say, hey, I just got some stuff going on. I don't think I can help somebody right now. I could use it myself. So, we've had people kind of come and go a little bit from the team, but it's generally hovering about 15 to 20. And the way that we got people to come onto the team was from basically we had announcements. So our executive put out announcements saying, hey, if you'd like to be a part of this program, please fill out this little form. And then they sent the forms on to myself, Jennifer, and Dr. Jenny McCutcheon, who's our mental health professional that helps monitor our program. We review those, and then once we go through the stack of applicants that we get, then we start setting interviews. And so we want to make sure that we're getting kind of a wide range of people as far as what they do in the office, cultural diversity, different positions in the office. We have everything in our team, from attorneys to, at one point, the mailroom guy was a member of our peer support team, and he was phenomenal. He left us for another job a few years ago, but we really run the gamut as far as who is a member of our team. We don't have any requirements that you have to be here for a certain length of time or they have to have a certain position. If you are willing to listen to somebody else who has a problem in this kind of a setting, we were more than happy to give you an interview and see if you were a good fit for the team. And the team really is about picking the right people, like not the highest ranking people in the office, but just definitely the right people, the people who could show the type of compassion that somebody needed. Sometimes there were people who applied who had been in management, and that wasn't really an issue, but sometimes when we asked them questions, they couldn't quite get away from being a supervisor and kept coming back to certain things. And they made up, they're great people, they're really nice, but they weren't the right fit. So when you do the interviews, you're certainly looking to pick the right people for your team. Our mental health professional, I told you, is Dr. Jenny McCutcheon. Dr. McCutcheon works a lot with law enforcement officers. Many times when agencies have an officer that may need some type of assistance, she's one of the referrals that they will often give. She has been helping us since the get-go. She spends a lot of time not only helping us pick our team, but she does additional training, and she's just been absolutely wonderful. I really can't say enough fabulous things about Dr. Jenny. So if you are looking to have this type of a program, you definitely need a Dr. Jenny. And the thing that really makes our program run so well is not only that we have a really good mental health professional going, but this program really requires a lot of support from the top down. This isn't really something that can be started easily with kind of a grassroots thing. This really does need support from the top. And we're very fortunate that our past county attorney, Bill Montgomery, was very supportive of the program. Our current county attorney, Alistair Adele, and her chief deputy, Ken Vick, have been wonderful in allowing us to continue the program since they took over in November. So it's just been a really great transition with leadership that understands why we have this program and what the needs are. And we've been able to keep Dr. Jenny sort of with us so that we can continue to do the great things that we've been doing for the last number of years. So for the interview process to pick your team, we had Dr. Jenny help develop questions and create kind of a scoring graph for us. And we're really looking for people who have the values that we wanted. They will understand the whole confidentiality criteria that we have. They seem to have good judgment. Are they somebody that if you needed to talk to somebody confidentiality, in a confidential setting, is this the person whose office you'd want to walk into? So once they finish with the interview process, we send out mostly letters of acceptance and welcome our people to our team. And then once they get onto the team, then there's some training that we send them through. There's a 3-day program where they go through basically the same training that the CISM law enforcement equivalent will attend. So they'll attend a few days there. And then there's also another day that they spend with Dr. Jenny doing some training that's a little more focused on our office type setting. And then after they've attended all the training, then they're sort of activated and able to respond to calls and assist other employees if they have any needs. So what we did was once we had the program and we're ready to go, we needed to develop our program policies, which as I mentioned before, we had to talk about confidentiality and all sorts of issues like that. We borrowed a lot of things from other offices with the CISM program and kind of tweaked them because we needed them to fit our needs in our office, but it was very workable. We developed a brochure for our office, and we definitely thank the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. We took their brochure and were able to, again, tweak it and change some things and make it good for our office. And we keep Dr. Jenny sort of on deck because every so often, about every quarter or so, it's been a little less with COVID, but we try to do some kind of a training to make sure that our team members are up to date on what's going on, if there's any issues that are coming up. And we also make sure that we're reaching out to supervisors around the office to let them know that, hey, don't forget that we're here. If somebody you're supervising seems to be experiencing some kind of stress and looks like they could use, a chance to talk to somebody, refer them to us, or maybe just, let us know so-and-so might need a checking in. So we handle things that way. So what else do we do? We, like I said, we did our training. We got a referral list in case somebody needs a more serious type of assistance than we're able to provide. We also developed a statistical reporting form for our chief deputy to examine. And this is basically so the office can track, how much we're being used. There is absolutely no identifying issues or anything on that form. It just basically lets us know how many calls we had, how many, were initial calls, how many were follow-up, and some general natures of things, but no names, no, bureaus, nothing that you could ever identify anybody with. So then once we finished up that, we were officially ready to go. So in the beginning, we basically started in May of 2013. That's when we officially launched. And we had our first team meeting with our members. And the other thing that we did was we were able to get a designated peer support office. And we were very grateful to that because those of you who have office-based concerns and people might be doubled up, we had the luxury of actually having a designated office for the peer support team. And we just moved into a beautiful new building at the beginning of the year, right before COVID hit. And our peer support office has a designated office for us in a kind of a hidden hallway. It's not very well traveled, which is kind of the whole point. If you can have an office available to have your peer support meetings for people and have people meet you in there, that's always great. We have coverings over the windows so people don't see who's in there. We have some, like a round table as opposed to a desk and a chair. It looks very inviting, like it's, minus the coffee. If you were going to sit down with somebody and have a discussion, it's very inviting. We got some nice artwork up on the walls. And so that way people know that is an office that we go to for peer support. And again, it's very sparsely traveled, so nobody really goes down there. And it's always a good place to meet somebody if they want to try to keep their meeting on the down low. The other thing that we did was we had our program put on our intranet. We have our own internal internet site, and we list all the team members there. And the reason we do that is so that people know who is on this peer support team. They can call the office and leave a message, and somebody will check that, eventually get back to them. They can call the on-call phone. But if there's a certain team member that somebody might feel comfortable talking to, they can certainly get their information off of our intranet and call them. I've been at my desk numerous times. The phone's rang and someone said, "Hey, I need some peer support. Can you meet me at the Starbucks down the street or in the office or wherever it was?" And we've worked that out. And that way too, people can kind of pick who they want to talk to. There may be somebody on the list, they don't know necessarily who's on call, but you may have an attorney who says, "You know what, I need to talk to another attorney because I don't know if a paralegal or somebody else is going to get what I'm telling them." Or we may have somebody say, "You know what, I'm going to pick this person because I don't really know them and I want to run what's going through my head by a total stranger, and I think that might make me feel better." So we have it set up so anybody in the office can just click on the internet, find out who the team members are, and call any of them. And if that person is available, that person is going to respond. Our people are very, very good about that. The other thing that we do is we have an on-call member. So right now, if I pick up the phone and I dial my on-call phone, one of my team members who is on call 24/7 is going to answer that phone. We take the on-call very seriously. People have that phone with them 24/7 during their week-long shift. And every quarter or so, I just set up a new schedule where I get people's availability and they tell me if they can take calls at that time. So that's worked out very well. We get a number of calls on the on-call phone. We get a lot of them more from people who know us that we're in peer support and seek us out. But having the on-call phone certainly helps after hours. If somebody is at their home stressing out at 11 o'clock at night, we want to make sure they know we are available to them. So it's just the worst thing in the world that ever goes to voicemail. So we take that very seriously and we really monitor our phones. So anyway, here's our example. Sorry about the eye test there, didn't mean for it to be. But this is our internet, what it looks like when you pull up the peer support program on our intranet. The people with the red on there, this is an old slide. I'm not working as a supervisor right now, but the ones who have the little red marks there, those individuals are supervisors. So what we did was about a year or so into the program, we determined that, a supervisor should have somebody maybe at their peer level to go talk to, because we didn't think that a lot of supervisors wanted to, talk to somebody who may not be a supervisor. Not that anyone's going to disclose anything, but if there's a supervisory issue, they may feel more comfortable. So we actually opened up the program to people who are in supervisory positions, and we designated on our internet which people they are, just so if somebody does have a concern and wants to talk to a supervisor member of the team, they have that opportunity. So we've expanded. We started in 2013, and in 2014, they made our program part of our new employee orientation, which I was a huge fan of because people needed to know that we are there. So every time there is a new employee orientation, that's not during this COVID time, we physically go into the orientation, and it's generally two people from the team. It doesn't have to be myself. It could be anyone on the team. We go in there, we meet the new employees, we hand out our brochures, and we just make sure they know that we are there, and if you need something, here it is. And we've gotten a lot of really good reception from the people that we talk to. We also got team shirts so that, we have a shirt with our name on it. It's like a polo. When we go to meetings with other CISM groups or other peer support groups, we can wear our team shirts and kind of look like we're part of the group. We also got our designated cell phones so that we didn't have to use any personal phones to have people get a hold of us. We've had at least 2 additional recruitments since we started. We're hoping to do maybe in the next year another recruitment. We added the supervisor component, and one year at our annual staff meeting, we actually gave out these little gavels. I've got one on my desk that I can't stop playing with sometimes, but they're basically stress balls that are shaped like gavels, and they have the peer support phone numbers on them. So if somebody is at their desk and they need peer support, they don't have to, stress over looking up our phone number. They can look at the little stress ball that we gave them, and the phone numbers are right on there. So we thought that was great, and hopefully someday down the road we'll be able to do that again, because I think that was very effective in reaching out to people and showing them something that will help link them to our program. So we definitely want to promote and encourage the team use, and we also want to make sure that we're taking care of our team. So if you do happen to be in a situation where you can run one of these teams, first of all, it's good to have regular team meetings. We try, and of course COVID's made it a little more challenging, and not everyone has the computers for doing this, but I will send out emails regularly just to check in on the members of the team, make sure that they're there. If somebody had something really good happen or did something really well, I want to make sure that we're thanking them for their hard work and congratulating them. If there's a significant event, it's incredibly important that you have some kind of a debriefing, and that's a good place to get your mental health professional involved as well. And we'll talk about some significant events that have happened, what that looks like. And members have some great ideas. One thing that we're looking at doing is getting little magnets to put on our doors somewhere just to identify us as team members. And that way, people who may not be thinking about it at the moment might see that and say, it wouldn't hurt to go talk to somebody, just to remind them always that we are there and we are available to listen if they need us. Beyond our program, we have expanded our program and hopefully motivated some other places to try to develop something similar. When I gave this presentation on our program a few years ago, David Larson from King County was there. He was very excited about what we had to say, and he went back to his administration in Washington, and they now have their own peer support program, which is just wonderful. And we sent them all sorts of materials to help them get started. So it was very, very exciting to see that another agency had the same enthusiasm for this that we did, continue to grow and expand their team. We also, in the last roughly year, have expanded a program at the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's Office. A number of years ago, I remember I was actually on call during this time. There was just a horrific call of a woman who killed all 3 of her young children. I don't want to go into details and scar anybody, but it was pretty awful, and to the point where staff at the medical examiner's office was incredibly upset by what was coming in, and we actually reached out and offered our services to them, and somebody at their office said, you know what, we might want to just have a little team over here as well. So I understand are off and running and working on their program to get that going. We also, as I said, we had supervisors that were brought in, so we have, kind of a mentoring aspect to it. And our next stop is our Prosecuting Attorneys Advisory Council. So we're hoping at some point to present our program there to all the other prosecuting agencies in Arizona and hopefully assist them in expanding and having this type of a program. Some notable responses, like I said, there's things that you just cannot predict, and you never know when you're going to be needed or for what. There was an incident where a elderly victim was giving a very passionate statement in court, and she literally just stopped talking, grabbed her chest, and fell to the ground and died. And it was, I couldn't even imagine being the prosecutor or being somebody in court when that happened. So that was somebody that we reached out to. We had a number of employees who saw somebody fall to their death from a parking garage across the street. That was a full-blown incident. I found out about it because I think my husband had heard it from somebody, and he immediately texted me. I was in an interior office in a meeting, and we wound up just activating our entire team and having people just running all over the building, finding employees who had seen this, who were incredibly upset, and being able to tend to them. So we had quite a few responses from them. We brought in our mental health professional to help debrief some people who were still struggling with what they had seen, talk to team members. So that was kind of our first major incident that obviously nobody could ever have predicted. And having our team was just incredible to have that kind of response there, because we really did have people breaking down in their offices and just crying and sobbing, and so it made me feel good to know that our team was able to respond to those employees and help take care of them and get them into a better place. Some statistics, we haven't updated this with the 2020 just because a lot of that material is here at the office, and for the past several months we've been working mostly at home, but as you can see, our number of responses has steadily grown. I think we dipped just a tiny bit in 2019, but the word is getting out that our program is here and people are using it. So we're still very excited that people are taking it to heart and are still very excited to have our program. We have had calls while we've been in, sort of the COVID lockdown. My phone will ring, and I have had several times where I am just going into another room in the house away from everyone else, and I'm in there for a while because this person on the phone is the most important person at the moment because they really need me. So we are still there and we are still responding. So a couple little cartoons because I like these little graphics. Now, some lessons learned. We just sometimes didn't feel like our team was meeting enough. So once, especially COVID's over, we're certainly looking to have more of like a set quarterly meeting. We have flex days at our office, so sometimes getting our whole team together is a little challenging. If anyone is in trial, that takes several of our team members sort of out of commission, but we really want to ensure that we're meeting on a regular basis. We want to make sure that we have a process and a chain of command to address significant events effectively. One of the lessons that came from that was that incident with the parking garage, because I happened to be in the office that day. I happened to be able to launch in and do something. But, the question was always like, gosh, what if I hadn't been there that day? Or what if I'd been, at a meeting off site or something like that? It would not have gone as smoothly as we thought it went. So we had to kind of talk to our chain and say, hey, if something happens, here's the procedure. And the other thing is, too, just make sure you're consulting with your mental health professional throughout the process. Everyone needs a Dr. Jenny, so to speak, to run this program effectively and have somebody to consult. Because sometimes you're just going to get those calls and you're like, so, what do you do with it? So we do have somebody that if we think we need to escalate something, we have our mental health professional to call and direct us, and it's just absolutely invaluable. As far as COVID goes, this was actually really surprising. And I talked to my team a couple times, and I just wanted to know, are you getting a lot of people who are just really stressed out and upset about COVID? And I was a little surprised the answer is no. We have had some calls about people who are concerned, and a lot of those revolved around, I'm concerned about catching it. That really worries me. We had a few people in the beginning when things were starting to shut down who were visibly upset at the office. We took care of them, but I really expected that my team was having a lot more calls about it, and they actually weren't. And I think this is in part because we had really good communication from our office. And I have to say, I really do hand it to Ms. Adele and our administration. I think they're doing a phenomenal job of keeping our employees informed about what is going on, what the rules are, what the plan is. I think we're doing really good with that. And I think because of that, employees are not experiencing this whole stress of the unknown. And every time an issue comes up, or the budget had to be cut a little bit, are we going to have furlough? I mean, they were quick to step in and answer those questions. And I think that's why we haven't had a lot of COVID-related stressors that we've seen around the office, just because we've had such good contact with our administration. I know that probably not every office around the country is as good as this might be. And that may be a cause of stress, and something that if you have a team, you're thinking about a team, might be something to address is just having good communication on an issue like this, where there's a global pandemic and we're affected at a local level. So some things that we want to definitely make sure we're aware of as team members and as prosecutors who do DV cases, for example, there's a huge increase of domestic violence victims who just can't get assistance. And a lot of jurisdictions around the country are reporting a huge increase in domestic violence cases because people are now confined with their abusers. So that's certainly a source of stress, and something that I know that talking to our current domestic violence, some of the attorneys in that group, they're definitely seeing it because people who usually see it and can report it, they're not around. And there's a lot of emotions coming from our victims who feel somewhat even more helpless than usual because they can't even get or try to get to people who can really help them. So that is a kind of a unique victim stress that we've seen coming out of the COVID time. But, we talked to Dr. Jenny about COVID, and she's passed on some information. These are things that our team members, try to explain to our customers who come to us with COVID concerns, and things that I actually read these myself just to make sure I'm in a good place, because we've never experienced this in our lifetime. And there's very few people out there who lived through the last pandemic. So this is all very novel. So, make sure that overall, if you, inside or outside of the team, that you're taking care of yourself, you're getting sleep, you're eating correctly, make sure that you're not focusing just on what's going on with the pandemic. Do your good work, then go home, or try to stay home if you can. She talks to us about making sure you're, still doing family activities. I can tell you that from my perspective, my husband and I have always commented that we've never had such great family time as we've had during this pandemic, just because we're not spending hours and hours in a car. We're spending that at home. And then once 5 o'clock comes, we have more time with our family. And we're able to do a few more things together just because time has allowed that. So those are things that we definitely want to focus on and make sure our customers know. And I don't like reading slides to people because I know you can read, but, it's just a few highlights is, try not to watch so much of the news, or make sure you're getting reliable news when you're looking at it, because if I got all my news off of Facebook, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. But this will pass. We do have a new normal right now involving, having to wear masks and social distancing from each other. And it kind of stinks in a way. I mean, I'm very social. I miss my friends. I actually came down here to the office to present just because I knew there's a couple other people in the office I can physically look at who I'm not related to. And while I love my family, just having other people around sometimes has been very helpful for me. But, and also if you definitely need some mental health help as a result of the stresses that are brought on by this pandemic or anything else, please make sure to get it. A peer support program, one of our jobs is definitely to help refer people to those, and we're certainly a good resource for that. Some other hot button topics that we've had for peer support, not only COVID, but with the recent demonstrations and race issues that have gone on in the last month or so, people want to talk about these types of things, and we've made sure that people in our office know, we're not here to judge anybody's opinion or what you think. We're not changing anybody's opinion, but if this is something that you just want to talk about, but you're kind of afraid to because you think you might be judged one way or the other, peer support is a good forum for this. And my cohorts in King County noted that they had some increased use regarding this type of issue that came up there in Washington. And as you know, Seattle's been just a very newsworthy location right now between that and the Chaz and everything that's going on there. So people have had a definite increased use of their program to discuss these types of issues. So the issues that we cover can run the gamut. It could be somebody's having a family issue, a personal issue. It could be work stressors, which is mainly why we're there, but we don't turn anybody away. If somebody needs to talk, they need to know that there's a program there where a non-judgmental person is going to sit and listen to them. And oftentimes that's all that somebody needs is I just need somebody to talk to, and that's why we're there. So for those of you who do domestic violence prosecution, please, consider having some type of program like this at your office, because I know a lot of what you go through because I've been there, and you do an amazing job, and there's just so much on your plate, and we recognize that. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me about the program. And again, thank you for all that you do. You guys are amazing. So with that, I'm ready for any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you so much, Hilary. So we will now open it up for questions. As a reminder, you can use your GoToWebinar toolkit located on the right-hand side of your screen. We do have time probably for a couple of questions before we end here. One that came in, we launched our program in Santa Clara County DA's office this year. Do you have critical incident debriefs for groups who have gone through something tough together? And do you have group meetings for teams in the office like the SEC team or DD team?
Okay, you broke up a little bit on there. Can you repeat kind of the last half of that?
Sure. The second part of that was, do you have group meetings for teams in the office like SEC team or DD team?
We don't. Every bureau has their own meetings, and I supervised domestic violence for a number of years, and we met as a group weekly. But as far as the team goes, we're kind of run the gamut on there. We meet about quarterly, just because that's probably about as many times as we can get our folks together. If there is a critical incident, though, we definitely want to try to have a debriefing, depending on if it sort of meets our standard of what a critical incident was. There's been a couple times where we've had to activate the entire team and send people kind of out to look for things and look for people. And in those cases, you definitely want to have a team meeting afterwards to talk about, if everyone is doing okay. Again, you don't talk about the specifics or what anyone had to say necessarily, but just, are you doing okay? What was going on? Were you able to calm the person down? You definitely want to talk about those things, and then have a mental health professional come in if it was something that was so substantial, just to make sure that people aren't having any lingering effects from what happened during the incident.
Okay, great. So it looks like we are out of time. So if you do have additional questions, please email us at webinars@apainc.org, and we will make sure those questions get forwarded to our speakers today. Thank you once again to ALDS and our wonderful speakers for sharing with us your efforts and all that you do to provide assistance and resources to prosecutors. And thank you to our webinar audience in attendance. All previous APA webinar materials and recordings are available at no cost on our APA membership website, and we will be notifying you via email when these materials become available and how you can access them through a temporary membership. If you are a current APA, prosecutor, court, law enforcement, or criminal justice partners member, you will have automatic access to webinar materials once they are available online. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, please email us at webinars@apainc, that's APAINC.org. Thank you for attending and have a nice day.